Before we get started, if you find yourself enjoying this story, please consider giving it a like and hit subscribe. As a new and growing channel, every subscription is incredibly impactful. Thanks for supporting our channel and enjoy the story. I woke to the screech of my phone's emergency alert siren, the kind that usually signals a tornado watch or a flash flood. But that night, 3:12 a.m., according to my blurry eyes, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the only thread of water was my leaky bathroom faucet. The screen glow illuminated the dark bedroom, painting the walls pale blue. I blinked, squinted, and finally focused on the glaring text. Emergency alert. Stay inside until further notice. No mention of a storm or a missing child. No mention of a chemical spill or a broken gas line. Just a stark command in bold letters. I rubbed the grit from my eyes and tapped the notification. Nothing else. No details. No explanation. Just a statewide broadcast telling everyone to remain indoors. By the time I got my bearings, my phone had gone silent. The screen locked again, returning me to darkness. Through my half-open curtains, I saw the faint glow of the street lamp outside. All seemed normal, quiet, still. Our suburban cul-de-sac rarely saw any commotion at night, maybe a stray raccoon or an occasional ambulance siren from the highway, but nothing that would warrant an emergency alert. Despite the oddity of it, I tried to go back to bed. I had an early shift at the bookstore in the morning. Well, more accurately, in a few hours. I was dead tired. My body was craving another 3 hours of sleep. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the what-ifs started swirling. What if there was some real threat? The government doesn't just send out cryptic orders for no reason. I checked online. Absolutely nothing. People in other states were posting pictures of their midnight snacks, memes, and idle chatter. No sign of a national crisis. Another quick scroll. Folks from my city were also confused, reposting screenshots of the same alert, everyone asking, "What's going on?" I was half convinced to ignore it, just brush it off, but something prodded at my mind. I decided to at least peek out of the window. Maybe the cops were patrolling, or maybe a big accident had closed the road. I shuffled over and parted the curtains. A single street lamp cast a sickly orange light across the pavement. My small yard looked the same as ever. A short driveway with my beat-up hatchback. A dying birch tree swaying in the breeze. The rest of the road was still empty. No vehicles, no movement. Just rows of dark houses, lights off, presumably full of sleeping neighbors. I should have gone back to bed, but a sliver of unease made me keep watching the street, scanning for any sign of why we had to stay inside. A few minutes passed. Nothing. My eyelids drooped, and I let the curtains fall back. "You're overthinking," I told myself. "Go to bed. Check the news in the morning." But then I saw something move outside. A tall figure, but there was something uncanny about it. The way it moved. It stopped at the edge of my property, turning to face my house. They lifted an arm slowly, as if reaching out, and then stillness. I felt an intrusive thought. They know I'm watching. An irrational panic flared. Stay calm, I thought. Maybe it's just some random passerby. But why would a random passerby stand at 3 a.m. in front of my yard, arm raised as if to knock from 20 feet away? I willed myself to let the curtain drop, stepping away so they couldn't see me. Another glance at my phone's alert repeated in my head. Stay inside. I locked the front door and switched off the living room lamp. If someone was outside, better not have them know I was awake and watching. Minutes ticked by. I pressed my ear against the window, but I heard nothing. Maybe they'd left. But that was only the beginning. I must have dozed off around 4 a.m. on the couch. I woke to the soft glow of dawn creeping through the curtains. My phone was buzzing with messages from friends and coworkers. Everyone was freaking out about that emergency alert. Some of them received a second alert around 5 a.m., repeating the same message. others didn't. My phone must have died in the night because it hadn't beeped again. I plugged it in, noticing I'd overslept. My shift started at 8, and it was already 7:15. That last chunk of broken sleep had left me feeling groggy. I peered out of the window. Full daylight revealed the empty sidewalk, no sign of the ominous figure. The sky was bright. Birds were chirping. Maybe I dreamed it. A second wave of text messages poured in once my phone booted up. Some were jokes. Zombie apocalypse LOL. Others were worried. Should we actually stay home? This is weird. A handful came from my boss, Garrett. We're still open, right? I can't find any official closure notice. Are you coming in? I flicked on the local news. The anchor looked rattled, scanning her teleprompter with wide eyes. She repeated the same lines. That last night, the entire region got an unspecified emergency alert telling people to remain indoors. The official source was unknown. Neither the state nor the county's emergency management claimed responsibility. There were no obvious disasters. The city police said they had no idea who sent it. A big mystery alert headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Still, it was morning, the sun was out, and the city was going about its business, so I forced myself to shower, dress, and drive to work. The bookstore was only 10 minutes away. The roads were busier than I expected for a Monday morning. Everyone was probably anxious, double-checking if it was safe to go to the office or bring their kids to school. Outside my window, people bustled, looking around with uneasy glances as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. At the store, Garrett greeted me with a forced laugh. "Heard you almost decided to hide under your bed after that weird message," he joked. I mustered a grin. "Yeah, it rattled me. Did you see anything strange outside last night?" He shrugged. "Slept through it, woke up, saw the texts, came here. Wish they'd let us know if it was a hoax." I nodded, my mind drifting back to the tall figure. I said nothing, worried that he'd think I was paranoid. We opened the doors, business as usual. Customers trickled in, many discussing the emergency alert in hushed tones. A few claimed to have seen suspicious people wandering their streets overnight. But everyone's stories were vague. Figures in the distance, silhouettes at street corners, no actual confrontation. By noon, it felt like half of the city believed it was a hack or a bizarre practical joke, while the other half theorized that something bigger was looming. I tried to forget about it and go on with my day. At around 3 p.m., the store was quiet. Garrett had stepped out to grab lunch, leaving me at the register. I scrolled through my phone's news apps. A bizarre new rumor circulated. Reports of random people found wandering highways on the outskirts of the city, unresponsive and pale. A few eyewitness accounts described them as if they'd been pulled from a morgue, but mainstream sources insisted it was just an unverified rumor. Then, all at once, my phone vibrated violently with another alert, the same jarring tone as last night. The screen read, "Emergency alert, remain inside. Lock windows and doors. Avert direct visual contact with unknown individuals." Unknown individuals? What does that mean? This time there was an explicit mention about not looking at them. My mind flashed to the figure standing outside my house. Maybe this was no hoax. One of the store's overhead TVs, which usually played a silent loop of promotional material, switched to a local news feed. The anchor repeated a breaking story. The city had just reissued an urgent stay-inside order. Government lines were jammed with no official press conference yet. The anchor's face looked frightened. A handful of customers in the store gasped at their phones. Some tried calling relatives, others rushed to the windows, peering outside at the sunny sidewalks. A moment later, the city's emergency sirens started wailing, those massive air raid-style sirens that we sometimes test on the first Wednesday of the month, but rarely used otherwise. I glanced around. Did they want us to lock ourselves in the bookstore? For how long? My rational side said maybe it's just a precaution, but a deeper fear came to the fore. This is real. Something's out there. As if reading my mind, one customer, an older man with thick glasses, stepped outside anyway, muttering he had to get home. Another lady followed, phone pressed to her ear, exclaiming she had to pick up her kids. Garrett returned just then, arms full of coffee cups and a bag of sandwiches. He stared at me, the sirens echoing outside. "What the hell's going on?" he asked, voice shaky. I showed him my phone. New alert telling us to stay inside. He blinked. "I can't just lock the doors with customers in here, can I?" But within minutes, the few who remained either trickled out in a rush or hid behind shelves, making frantic phone calls. One couple asked if we had a basement or back room to shelter in. This was surreal, like a scene from a disaster movie. Through the glass, the sky remained painfully bright, as if mocking our fear. People scurried along the sidewalks or rushed to cars. I saw a woman across the street yank her child's hand, practically dragging him inside a pharmacy. Everyone was retreating indoors. And then I saw them. Two figures strolling along the far sidewalk, seemingly unbothered by the commotion. They were tall, though maybe not as tall as the one from last night, but they had the same odd gait, as if each step took effort or had an unnatural grace. I squinted, catching glimpses of pale skin, or maybe it was white clothing. It was too far to tell for sure. I jolted my head away, turning from the window already. My mind flashed to that unsettling memory of the figure outside my house. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my breath to slow. Don't look directly at them. But how could we avoid it if they came here? Garrett and I decided to close the store early. We flipped the sign to closed and locked the doors. A couple of frightened customers huddled near the back. We told them they could stay as long as they wanted. One young woman, eyes wide, said she lived 2 blocks away but was too scared to run home. The city sirens kept wailing. Occasionally they'd pause and then start again. No official broadcast explained the reason, just a repeated text banner on the TV. Stay inside until further notice. We tried to settle in, but an undercurrent of fear kept us from feeling any sense of safety. The overhead lights cast an eerie glow on the shelves, lined with novels and journals. The store had big front windows, too big, really. Anyone or anything on the street could peer inside if they wanted. Garrett rummaged around for cardboard or something to cover them, but we only found a couple of large posters, nowhere near enough to block the glass. "Should we go in the back room?" I suggested. It was a small area where we stored extra inventory. No windows, just one emergency exit that led to the alley. Garrett agreed. We herded the few customers there and locked the door behind us. A single TV in the corner ran a constant news feed. We whispered among ourselves about what might be happening. Some speculated about a chemical spill causing hallucinations or escaped criminals, but that didn't explain the strange figures. Time crawled. The TV presenter repeated the same lines. No official statement except the alert, numerous sightings of unusual individuals, and widespread phone lines jammed. A few on-the-ground reporters said that folks had gone missing after stepping outside alone, but it was all unconfirmed. I texted my family, "Are you safe?" "Stay inside." My mom replied from 3 states over, "We're seeing the headlines. Are you okay? Please don't go out." I promised I'd keep her updated, and hours passed. We tried to keep busy, rummaging through the stock. The air in that small back room grew stuffy. Around 6 p.m., the sirens outside abruptly stopped. We collectively held our breath, listening for any sign of relief. But the emergency alert ticker on the TV remained the same. "Stay inside." That's when Garrett's phone rang, his wife calling from home. She was crying, said that neighbors were screaming about something in the yard. Their dog barked furiously at the window, then whimpered and ran under the bed. She heard footsteps on the porch. She locked herself in the bathroom, but after a few minutes, the footsteps faded. Garrett pressed his hand to his mouth, tears welling in his eyes. He told her to stay put, keep every door locked. The conversation crackled, the line dropping in and out. She whispered something about seeing a silhouette with elongated arms in the driveway, then the call cut off. The store's back room felt like a tomb. The customers and I stared at Garrett as he sank onto a box of books, his face pale. None of us had any illusions now. Something truly terrible was happening outside. As evening turned to night, the power flickered. If we lost electricity, we'd be sitting in the dark with no updates, no defense. I rummaged for flashlights in the store's emergency kit. We found one, plus a few dim battery-powered lanterns. We turned the TV volume low and huddled around it, occasionally stepping into the main store area to peer out. The streets were nearly empty, but I saw shapes moving between parked cars or lurking near doorways. A thought struck me. The city is full of these unknown individuals, drifting around, waiting for what? At about 9 p.m., another alert buzzed on my phone. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Do not engage with outside presences. Do not make prolonged eye contact. One of the customers, an older lady named Naomi, started weeping softly. "We're sitting ducks here," she murmured. "I should have gone home hours ago." Garrett tried to comfort her, though he looked equally spooked. "Better to stay put than to wander the streets," he said. We raided for food, just a few vending machine snacks and bottled water. We split them among the 5 of us. The local news looped the same warnings. The anchor, face drawn with fatigue, mentioned that the phenomenon seemed citywide. No, statewide. Reports poured in from all corners. Sightings of tall, silent figures, some with unnatural features. People who got too close either vanished or were found catatonic outside. The night had deepened. The store's windows, uncovered, gave me a partial view of the block. Occasionally I'd see a figure cross the road or stand beneath the flickering light. They never rushed, never ran, just slow, purposeful movements. One time, around midnight, I nearly yelped. A face pressed against the glass from outside. By the time I dared to peek up, the face was gone, leaving only a slight fog on the window. I returned to the back room trembling and told the others we had at least one visitor. Naomi turned whiter than a sheet, muttering prayers under her breath. "Why aren't they breaking in?" The young woman with us, Tamara, asked, voice shaking. None of us had an answer. Maybe they were content to roam unless provoked, or they required something else to enter a building. The speculation felt maddening. It was around 2 a.m. when the power went out completely. One moment the TV was still broadcasting shaky updates from a half-lit newsroom. The next, everything blinked off. We flicked on flashlights, cursing. The store was plunged into darkness. A tense hush fell over us. We heard distant sirens far away. In that silence, we heard a noise coming from the store's main area. We huddled close, deciding what to do. Should we remain in the back or try to see if someone was inside? Garrett whispered, "If they get in, we'll hear them. We should barricade the hallway." We all agreed. We stacked boxes and furniture near the door leading into the main store, forming a makeshift blockade. Then we waited. The noises grew in volume. The door handle started to turn. Naomi stifled a scream behind her hand. We pointed flashlights at the door. Then a voice, soft and scratchy, spoke from the other side. "Hello?" For a moment we froze. The voice sounded almost normal. A middle-aged man. It coughed. "Anyone in there?" "I need help." Garrett frowned. "A trick," he mouthed at me. I shrugged. I wasn't sure what to think. The voice resumed, trembling. "Please, my name's Sam. I'm not one of them. I got stuck outside when the lights died." Tamara flicked her gaze to me. Her lips formed silent words. We can't be sure. But something about the desperation in that voice tugged at my empathy. If it was a real person, we couldn't just leave him there to be discovered by those things. Cautiously, Garrett approached the barricade. How do we know you're human? He asked softly. A pause, and then a miserable laugh. I don't know. I can tell you the store manager's name is Garrett, right? I saw his name tag once, heard he'd stay open late. I recognized him behind the counter. Please. Garrett's eyes widened. He nodded to us, uncertain. We started moving boxes aside. If this was a trap, we'd be letting in God knows what. But Sam's voice cracked. They're out there, man. They're just standing around like they're waiting for something. Finally, we opened the door a crack. Our flashlight swept across a hunched man in his 30s, bearded, soaked in sweat. He held up shaking hands. I won't hurt you, I swear. We ushered him in, resealing the barricade. He collapsed on the floor, panting. Once he caught his breath, he told us how he'd tried to find shelter in a nearby diner, but it was locked. He saw the bookstore had lights earlier, so he came here. Then the power died, and he found the door locked. I heard them in the street, he whispered. They hissed or something. Then one turned its head real weird. I've never seen anyone do something like that before. A heavy silence fell. It matched the rumors we'd heard. Some might appear vaguely human, others more hideous. Sam said he'd managed to slip around the side. The front door was intact, but he forced the back door's latch with a metal rod. Hence the scraping we heard. We gave him water. He joined our group, but no one slept that night. At around 6:30 a.m., morning light filtered through the high windows of the main store. Maybe it was delusion, but we hoped that maybe things would be back to normal in the daytime. But as we peeked out, we saw the streets still littered with silent shapes. Some hunched figures leaned against lampposts, others paced back and forth. One bold person across the street apparently tried leaving their building. The moment they stepped onto the sidewalk, a tall figure drifted closer. The resident froze, then ducked back inside, slamming the door. The creature just stood there, as though it was guarding the block. Our phones buzzed with more texts from family and friends. Meanwhile, footage circulated online of entire neighborhoods being overrun by these things. Some dared to film them from rooftops or second-story windows. Many wore tattered clothing, as if they'd once been normal humans, but had decayed or changed. Rumors flew about how direct eye contact or speaking to them caused people to vanish. We realized we couldn't stay in the bookstore forever. We had minimal food, no power, and every passing hour weighed on us. Garrett was desperate to check on his wife. Sam wanted to find a safer location, maybe the city's emergency shelter. But how could we travel the streets if these creatures roamed freely? Finally, we formed a plan. Wait until midday, see if they leave. Some accounts online said the creatures wandered more at night. If they still lingered, we'd try escaping through the alley, maybe make it to Garrett's car. He'd parked a few blocks away, though that alone felt risky. Alternatively, I had my hatchback at home, but that was half a mile away. Time moved on. The creatures outside didn't disperse as quickly as we'd hoped. Some meandered off, but new ones appeared. In bright daylight, seeing them was even more unsettling. They drifted from yard to yard, occasionally tilting their heads as if listening. By noon, Sam peered through the front window. "Looks like there's only one on this block," he said, pointing to a figure near the pharmacy across the street, a tall, stooped shape wearing something like a dirty coat. "If we're fast, maybe we can slip into the alley." We debated for an hour longer, paralyzed with indecision. Finally, necessity won out. Naomi was diabetic. She had medication at her apartment. She'd missed doses and we were worried for her health. She needed to get home or to a hospital. So around 1 p.m., we mustered our courage. We unbarricaded the back room door, stepping into the main store. I looked out. The lone figure across the street paced back and forth, oblivious to us for now. The sidewalk near the bookstore was empty. We quietly unlocked the back door that Sam had forced earlier. The alley was narrow. Our group moved in a tight formation, scanning for threats. The air smelled of garbage and stale rain. We reached the end of the alley, peeking onto the side street. No creatures in sight, just abandoned cars. In the distance, a hum like thousands of quiet murmurs. We advanced slowly, with Naomi clutching my arm for support. Then, from behind a dumpster, something rose. I stifled a gasp. It was small, child-sized but hunched. The face was partially hidden by matted hair. It let out a faint, ragged exhale, turning large, dark eyes on us. We didn't dare move. My mind screamed at me, "Don't make eye contact." But it was too late. Its gaze caught me. A wave of disorientation hit. The creature's eyes were deep, swirling with blackness. My vision swam as if I might faint. Instinctively, I looked away, focusing on the pavement. My ears rang. Sam grabbed my shoulder, tugging me forward. The small creature didn't shriek or attack. It just watched, as though curious. We half ran, half stumbled away. The child thing made a soft, pitiful moan, but didn't follow. We hurried down a side street, heading towards Garrett's car. He insisted on checking on his wife. If we could get to his car, we'd try driving to her, or failing that, to the nearest hospital. Rounding the corner, we spotted the row where Garrett had parked. The block was eerily silent, every house shuttered. The creatures had to be lurking somewhere. We tiptoed along, scanning every driveway. Finally, Garrett's sedan came into view, but as we approached, we realized with dread that a tall figure leaned against the passenger door, as if dozing. Its arms were unnaturally long, draping past its knees, the skin patchy gray. We shrank behind a parked SUV, panting. "We can't just rush it," Sam motioned to circle around, but if we startled the thing, we took a huge risk. We stood for what felt like forever, trying to figure out what to do. Then, from some distant part of the neighborhood, a car alarm went off. The tall figure jerked upright, head swiveling, then loped away, presumably drawn to the noise. In mere moments, it vanished behind a row of houses. Our group exhaled collectively. "We have to move now," Garrett whispered, sprinting for the car. We piled in as quietly as possible. He fumbled with the keys and started the engine. The car roared to life, and for a terrifying moment, I expected the creature to reappear, but it didn't. Garrett floored the accelerator. We sped down the empty street, weaving around stalled vehicles. The radio was pure static except for the occasional emergency broadcast, repeating the "stay indoors, do not engage" warning. As we drove, the city looked eerie. Deserted sidewalks, a few shattered windows, cars abandoned mid-intersection. We saw a handful of these unknown things prowling. Some stood in clusters, heads tilted skyward, some crouched near doorways. The sense of dread was overwhelming. He managed to navigate near his neighborhood. The roads had debris, fallen branches, scattered trash. We spotted a police cruiser, driver's door flung open, no sign of the officer. When we arrived at Garrett's house, a modest single-story home, we found the front windows shattered and the door open. He ran out of the car, calling his wife's name. The rest of us followed inside. The living room was ransacked. "Marissa!" Garrett yelled, voice cracking. No reply. We searched the rooms. In the hallway, we found a trail of smeared footprints, slightly too long to be human. They were here. At the end of the hall, the bathroom door was locked from the inside. Garrett banged on it. No answer. We exchanged worried looks. Finally, he forced the door open. Inside was empty. The small window above the sink was shattered outward, broken glass glittering on the bathroom tile, along with a single wet footprint near the window. Garrett slumped to the floor. "She's gone," he choked. We guided him outside, trying to keep him from breaking down completely. The hopelessness weighed on all of us. Did these creatures take her? Did she escape? We had no answers. With nowhere else to go, we piled back into the car. We had 2 missions: get Naomi's medication, and then find safety, maybe a hospital or an official shelter. The roads near the hospital might be heavily guarded, or so we hoped. Naomi guided us to her apartment building. She had a key to the front door, and it seemed quiet enough. We hurried through the lobby. No staff, no lights. The elevator was out. We climbed 2 flights of stairs, terrified about what we might find. On her landing, we discovered a neighbor's door torn off its hinges. Inside, the furniture was overturned. No sign of the occupant. We pressed on. Naomi's unit was intact. She unlocked it, rushing to the bedroom for her insulin. Meanwhile, Sam and I guarded the door, flashlights scanning the dark corridor. My eyes kept darting to the neighbor's ravaged apartment. Naomi returned, clutching a small bag. She looked on the verge of tears. "I'm ready. Let's go." We were almost back down the stairs when we heard a faint moan from a ground floor hallway. As we approached the ground floor, there it was, a figure hunched over another body. My light revealed a horrifying sight. The body was a woman, presumably a resident, her eyes open and blank. The hunched figure knelt by her as if it was feeding. It felt wrong. The figure paused, head turning towards us. We froze. It made a choked hiss, then unbelievably, it straightened, leaving the body slumped on the floor. We backed away in fear. It advanced slowly, spidery limbs clicking on the tile. We turned and bolted for the side exit, with the creature's hiss chasing us. We burst out into the alley, panting. Sam shoved the exit door closed behind us, searching for something to wedge it. Naomi and Tamara hurried ahead towards the parked car. The creature bashed against the door from the inside. I saw a sickly pale hand clawing at the window glass. "Go!" Sam yelled. We sprinted to the car. Garrett floored it again. We left that building behind. We aimed for the hospital next, but the closer we got, the thicker the traffic jam. Cars abandoned, some crashed. The roads were impassable near the final blocks, so we parked in a side street. A few helicopters buzzed overhead, but I couldn't tell if they were news or military. The entire city felt on the brink of collapse. We tried to approach on foot, but the sidewalk was a chaotic scene. Shouts, a few civilians running, and creatures gliding between vehicles. One massive shape perched on top of a bus, scanning the street like a vulture. We took cover behind an overturned mail truck and weighed our options. Sam peered around the corner. "No way we're getting in there without running into them," he said, voice tense. Naomi sank to her knees, tears trailing down her cheeks. "Where do we go then? There's no official place for us to go." Tamara checked her phone. Some rumors pointed to a makeshift evacuation point at the sports stadium downtown, but no one could confirm. Others said that certain highways were barricaded by the National Guard. We had no guarantee we'd be safer anywhere else. We were starting to feel exhausted. We'd been awake for nearly 2 days. Garrett stared into the distance, still reeling from his wife's disappearance. At that moment, we heard a screech overhead. We all looked up to see a helicopter spinning out of control above the hospital. Thick black shapes clung to its landing rails, humanoid forms that should never have been able to reach such a height. The chopper veered, trailing smoke, then vanished behind a building. A distant crash, then silence. It was clear that the city had been lost. We had to think about our own survival. We decided to escape from the hospital district and head for the outskirts. Maybe we could find a less infested area, or even slip onto a rural highway. The plan was desperate, but staying in the city felt hopeless. We hurried back to the car. The creatures that once were scattered now seemed more numerous, drifting at intersections, standing on rooftops. Some parted or shrank away when we approached in the car. Others just stared blankly. That blank stare felt hungry. As we navigated side streets, the emergency alert buzzed once more. Final warning, extreme caution, remain indoors, evacuation not guaranteed, protect yourself. A final note flashed. Visibility triggers aggression, eye contact sets them off. That matched the rumors, but we had no choice except to keep driving, past burned-out storefronts, over a collapsed traffic light. We once had to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting a group of them standing in the middle of the street, gazing skyward. The group parted slightly, allowing us to pass, never lowering their heads. Eventually, we reached a quieter stretch of road leading towards farmland. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with purples and reds. We were running out of daylight again. Naomi fiddled with the radio, searching for signals. Only static and occasional bulletins advising people to stay put. We spotted a boarded-up gas station. We needed fuel. We pulled in, scanning for threats. The place looked deserted. Sam and I hopped out. We both had guns that we'd taken from a ransacked police cruiser. We forced the station door, finding the inside dark. We rummaged around for anything useful: bottled water, snacks, batteries. The generator for the pumps was off, but a manual override let us siphon enough fuel to fill the car. All the while, I kept glancing at the horizon. The sun was nearly gone. The second night was nearly approaching. Based on what we'd seen, they'd be more active at night. We had to hurry. Just as we were finishing, we heard a rustling behind the station. Tamara peeked around the corner and shrieked. "There's one here," she hissed. Oh God, it's messing with a stray cattle or something." I felt sick. We decided not to investigate. Garrett motioned for us to get in the car, but the creature heard the commotion and lurched around the corner. We scrambled into the car and slammed the door shut. The creature hissed, spindly arms reaching for the trunk. The tires screeched and we sped onto the open road. I didn't stop looking at it in the rearview mirror until it disappeared out of view. Night fell again, and we drove in near silence. I think everyone was either too exhausted or too terrified to talk. The farmland around us was mostly empty. Once in a while, we saw a farmhouse with lights off, sometimes a faint silhouette crossing a field. So these things had spread beyond the city. Finally, around 10 p.m., we saw a sign for a roadside motel. The parking lot had a few cars. We parked in the shadows, unsure if it was wise to stop, but we were exhausted, starving, and we weren't sure how far we could keep driving. Sam and I approached carefully. The office was locked. We spotted a faint glow in one window. Maybe someone was inside. We knocked softly. A scared-looking clerk peered out, then let us in once we showed we were human. Inside, we found a handful of travelers huddled in the lobby with flashlights, forming an impromptu refuge. They had blocked the motel entrances and set up a watch schedule. We introduced ourselves, explained we just fled the city. To our relief, they gave us 2 rooms. For the first time in days, we had something resembling safety. The windows were boarded, the doors were reinforced. A small group kept watch around the clock. We shared our supplies and ate a scant meal of canned soup. Naomi finally took her medication properly. Garrett lay on a cot, staring at the ceiling. Sam quietly fell asleep in a corner. Tamara wept softly, the stress of everything overwhelming her. I tried to rest in one of the musty motel beds, hugging a pillow. I couldn't stop thinking. How long until the government regained control? Will rescue teams arrive? Or is this the new normal? Creatures roaming the streets, forcing us to cower indoors indefinitely. At dawn, the clerk, named Louis, gave an update. "We've been in touch with a local ham radio operator," he said. "A convoy of National Guard is clearing sections of Highway 32 about 15 miles north. They're evacuating survivors. Some small towns have set up barricades." Our group latched on to that glimmer of hope. We decided to attempt to reach Highway 32, though the roads might still be dangerous. We said our thanks and goodbyes to the motel folks, who planned to stay put and wait for a more secure rescue. Gathering our meager supplies, we piled back into the car. We avoided major roads, weaving through backcountry lanes. Now and again we spotted them, drifting among fields. We'd slow down and do our best not to draw attention. Finally, around mid-morning, we reached the edge of a barricade, a row of military vehicles and armed guards. I hoped that finally we'd be safe. They signaled for us to stop. We obeyed, rolling down the window. A masked soldier approached, rifle at the ready, scanning us carefully. "You folks all right? Any bites or contact?" We shook our heads, explaining what we'd just experienced. The soldier nodded grimly. "We're evacuating civilians to a secure zone. There's a field station a few miles ahead. Park your car, you'll be processed and given shelter." With a sigh of relief from all of us, they waved us through. Beyond the barricade, we found an organized camp set up in a large clearing. Dozens of tents, vehicles, medical stations. Lots of families were huddled together, some wounded, many traumatized. We parked as instructed, stepping out onto dusty ground. A coordinator took our names, asked about injuries, but took our word for it, for the most part. Over the camp's loudspeaker, an official voice repeated instructions. "Remain within camp boundaries. Do not venture outside alone. The unknown threat still occupies large portions of the region." In the days that followed, we stayed at the camp, hearing bits of news. The emergency alert was still in effect for many counties. The unknown presences, as they called them, had claimed entire city blocks. The military was working to regain control, but the situation was dire. Some evacuees told stories of entire neighborhoods succumbing to these creatures, people vanishing, screams in the night. Was this an alien invasion? A supernatural plague? The authorities had no official explanation. Rumors flew. Some said the creatures were reanimated corpses. Others insisted they were extra-dimensional entities drawn to fear. But no one had concrete answers. Garrett held on to a slim hope that maybe, just maybe, his wife had escaped, would find her way here. Naomi was stabilized with proper medication. Sam vowed to volunteer for supply runs to help others. But there's no hope for me. As I lay here shaking and cold, I'm staring at the wound on my ankle. My skin's turning gray around it. I wanted to tell the group, tell the guards, but I discovered something today. I'm a coward. I don't want to die. Maybe a cure will be discovered soon. I just need to keep it hidden until that happens. So if you ever see these things, stay away from them, or you might end up like me. I'm going to try and get some rest now. I'm so very cold.